Hello, this is Mr. Elon, and welcome to part 3 of the portrait series, which is the plastic touch-up, the scary plastic doll like you see here. So I acknowledged in the introduction that this is kind of a weird thing to ask you to do. It's like a touch-up in a way, but you're taking it way, way further. A question that comes up is, usually along the lines of, why are we doing this? And the answer is, number one, it is going to teach you about another tool that is similar to, but different from a tool that you used on the subtle touch-up. But more importantly, it's going to teach you to contend with highlights and shadows. If I create a new file, let's say, and that's a weird shape, and let's say I just go ahead and draw this right here. I can draw a lot better than that. It's just, I'm drawing with the mouse here. If I, no, it's, supposed to be circular. If I ask you what that is, you're probably going to say, that's a circle. And if I get mad at you and I'm like, what are you talking about? How come you can't tell that's a ball? A sphere, your response would likely be because it's not shaded. You can't tell that this is a three-dimensional form until I go in and shade it, give it some sense of highlight and shadow, something like that. And again, that's not great. I can draw better than that, but you get the idea. So the same is true of photography and Photoshop manipulation. If I have a photograph, I'm not going to demonstrate this, but if I have a photograph of an elephant and a photograph of the beach, and I want to make it look like the elephant is enjoying a day at the beach, I might select the elephant and drag it over to the beach and stick it there. But then you might notice that in the beach photo, the sun is in the frame and it's on the right side, but the elephant was being lit from the left. And therefore, you're going to have an elephant standing on the beach where its shadow faces the sun. A lot of times people won't be able to put their finger on why that looks wrong, but they're instantly going to know that it looks stupid. So teaching students to try to observe and contend with highlights and shadows, much the way a painter would. Ultimately, when you're a painter and you're trying to paint things realistically, that's like one of the hardest things to conquer, is to like really see what light is doing and to be able to capture it accurately. To better illustrate this, we're looking at the relatively good example here. A bad example might be this right here, which is this right here. I'll just open it in Photoshop so I can zoom a little better. Now, this is terrifying to look at. And again, a lot of people won't be able to put their finger on why. But it has to do with the fact that, again, there are no shadows. There are some other issues, and there are no details on my face. But yeah, there are no shadows here, which just makes the whole thing look like flat and fake and scary. I'll go ahead and close out of that before it haunts your dreams. Another illustration is right here. So in this case, I'll open it in Photoshop again. In this case, I completely disregarded highlights and shadows, and I kind of smeared across so that I ended up with these weird dents in my face, like I, deformed, or I, got the crap beat out of me. So I got this dent in my forehead because this highlight that was, relatively natural is kind of now bending around in a weird way. The highlights here and the shadows here are all out of whack. So when you do the plastic thing, which is actually pretty easy, it's not going to take you a lot of time, unless you have to redo it, and in which case, it'll probably take you several tries. But it's pretty easy as long as you follow some basic instructions. So I'm going to go back to my original, and I'm going to work with that. I will say that while this finished version, you can see I went crazy on the whites of the eyes and the teeth and the color in the iris. You don't actually have to do any of that. You're welcome to. Some people find it more comfortable to look at when they actually take it even further with that, so that people can tell it's like an intentional joke. I think I might have even like made my lips more pink here. So if you want to do some of that stuff, you can, but I will tell you that the only thing that I'm looking for is the skin and how you handled the skin, and again, specifically the highlights and shadows on the skin. Okay, here's how you do... Oh, I don't need that anymore. So here's how you do it. First of all, you're going to use a new tool. That tool, I mentioned in the last video that sometimes you can click and hold, and there are other tools hidden underneath the tool you're using. So the last tool that I left off was the blur tool, and underneath the blur tool is one called the smudge tool. So you're going to highlight that on your paper here. And it's kind of small. In fact, I'll just kind of zoom here. If you look really closely next to the blur tool, this little pop-out menu, is exactly what I was just talking about. And if I go in and highlight smudge tool, and you can even, kind of highlight it over here too, if that's helpful. So smudge tool looks like a little finger kind of pointing downward. And what it does is it kind of treats this like it's wet paint. So it does have brush size and hardness. I would leave the hardness down. I'm going to take the size up for now. And I'm going to keep the strength at about 50%. And just to demonstrate what it does, I'm going to go like that. So again, it's like it's wet paint, and I'm taking my finger and just smearing the wet paint around. The degree to... I'll undo what I did here. The degree to which it works... it very much depends on the strength, which you adjust at the top. So if I take the strength down some, it's not going to drag or reshape things as much, or blend color as much. If I take the strength up, what it's going to do is it's going to just like grab whatever I click on and just grip it hard while I drag. It's just going to kind of drag the stuff around it. Again, not something that I would want to do for this. So I'm going to keep it maybe a little below 50%. I would say somewhere between 30 and 50 is fine. Even a little less might be okay. And I'm going to zoom in here. And to illustrate what not to do, I'm just looking at my forehead right now. I'm going to just like start grabbing this shadow right here. So you can see as I'm working with my forehead, it is smearing away my complexion, but it's also making this weird crease in the middle of my forehead. It's like it's continuing those little creases that happen above my nose and adjacent to my eyebrows. If I come over here and start dragging this way, again, there's a feeling that my forehead is getting dented and reshaped. So you're not going to want to do that. Another thing you're not going to want to do, and this is similar to using the blur tool, you don't want to be using it here at all. Not only, am I reshaping features, but in general, I'm making them very blurry. So you can kind of use the smudge tool like a really extreme version of the blur tool, which is essentially what I'm doing. But I only want to do that, once again, on flat patches of skin. And I want to be careful about my brush size too. And there is a little trick, the bracket keys on your keyboard. Those are the keys that are next to the letter P. They're like parentheses, but like hardcore geometric parentheses. The bracket keys are a quick way to shrink or grow your brush size. And anytime I'm dealing with a brushy type of thing, I often just kind of ride those bracket keys. All right, so here's what you're going to do. You are going to pick an area. Right now I'm going to do my 5 head. And in this area, you are going to click. That's me clicking. You are going to hold and wiggle around. You see I'm making teeny tiny movements, just like spinning around just a little bit. And then I'm going to let go. Blip. I just let go. So I'm not dragging anything ever. And I'm basically going to repeat that several times. So I move over here. Click. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And I got a little blemish there, so maybe I'll wiggle a little extra, or maybe I'll let go, and then move over top of the blemish and wiggle even more until it just melts out into the rest of the skin tone. And again, anytime I move significantly, I'm letting go. So click, wiggle, 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 let go, click, wiggle, 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 let go, and so on and so forth. Now, You want to be careful not to get too close to anything. So especially when I'm like tucking into the area of my forehead that's approaching my temple, I'm going to start using my bracket keys to kind of shrink this down a little bit. You don't want to use a brush size that's too small. You want to use a brush size that's appropriate for the area you're working with. If it's too big, it's going to have a tendency to blur things you don't want it to. But if it's too small, it's going to have a tendency to start looking like cottage cheese. And in other words, I don't think I need to demonstrate it, but if I just do like this area, then this area, then this area, then this area, it's going to like just find commonalities in those little areas, and it's going to make it feel less than homogenized. And the goal here is to homogenize it. So again, I'm not overlapping anything. I'm finding a brush size that seems appropriate for the area, and I'm just spinning, spinning, spinning. Coming over here, doing the same thing. If you have, like I got like little wrinkles under my eye, so it's kind of up to you if that's a detail you want to try to melt away, or if you want to just leave that on. I'll probably just do the top half of my face so you can kind of see what it'll end up looking like. Once again, you don't have to do any of that other stuff. You don't have to like mess with your pupils or iris or your whites of your eyes or teeth or anything like that. If you want to do that stuff, you can. So that is pretty much it. Now, again, you're going to find that in situations like this, I've got like a hard shadow here. So anytime there's like a hard shadow or a highlight, you can still blur near it, but you want to be mindful of it. You don't want to start spreading it or reshaping it or anything, because it's very easy if I move too much to go like that and have it reshape my face. I'm undoing that. That's pretty much it. And, again, I didn't do the entire thing. I've got a couple small areas in here that I could have done, and I didn't like really do anything in here. Now I've got a kind of a patchy beard here, so you probably have a little more to do than I would. But you should notice a pretty significant difference, especially if I stay zoomed in here. If I kind of revert back to the original, there's all sorts of blemishes and, like just kind of like a sense of pores and things like that. And when I jump down to the bottom, all that stuff melts away. The skin just kind of becomes plastic. If you are a painter or a drawer, and you draw from life, you might know the trick of squinting your eyes at things. If you squint your eyes at something to observe it, you are essentially melting away the details. You narrow your eyes enough that you can't see the details, and then you start being able to see basic things like highlights and shadows a little more. So the idea with this is that you're going to not only have to contend with those while you're working, but that getting rid of the detail on your skin is kind of like squinting, because it's melting away the detail that you otherwise might focus on and allowing you to look, right here, for instance, it's easier to see than it was before, that there's a highlight here, a mid-tone here, some shadows here. Once again, the plastic thing, as long as you do it right, doesn't need to take very long. Some people will complete the subtle touch-up and the plastic touch-up within the span of one period or slightly more than that. And that way, that's good. They have plenty of time when they go on to the touchdown to get creative and go overboard with it. That's what I'll show on the next video. Good luck with step 3, and I'll see you in class.